So right here we're trimming this while it's still fairly wet so that we're able to attach the feet without there being a problem. So just looking for a rounded base to the cauldron. Okay. And the lugs that I held the cauldron on the wheel with can become the feet. You can get these little spinner discs that have markings at the different points. So for this cauldron mug, I'm going to be doing 3 feet. So I'm going with the blue marks here. Sort of place that in the center. Sometimes it takes a little bit to figure out how thick proportionately the feet of the cauldron should be. Because sometimes I'll sort of start smoothing out a foot-like shape. Let's mark where these are going to go first. Probably right here, right here, and right here. So let's flip it over. I'm just going to set this a little to the side of where we actually want it. See if we think that's going to be a chunky enough foot. Yeah, I think that that looks pretty good. We'll see if we change our mind when we put it on. And I like when these look like they're a little bit alive. So I want the feet to have some sort of definitely more asymmetrical, organic look to them because the pot itself is very symmetrical. So it's nicer when I think you have that contrast in form. So let's see. That's one. It's a little bit long for my taste, but I'm going to see how these look when all of them are on, and then we can see if we want to shorten it a little bit. So the standard 266 clay is very forgiving as far as attaching things, but this is a very good consistency, so I'm not too worried about using vinegar or anything like that. I'm just gonna pop these on. Now the base of this pot could have been a bit thicker, so I'm trying to support that a little bit as I'm pushing on it. Because a cauldron mug requires a handle, I'm only making one of them because after yesterday's handle challenge, if you watched that, I don't want to make any more handles. So we're just going to do one cauldron mug and hopefully it'll come out. It's the hard thing about making these videos is you don't know if you're going to succeed yet. I have made quite a few of these cauldron mugs in the past though, so we have some amount of faith. Okay. So once it's you get it kind of where you want it, you're going to be kind of like making sure it seems like it's a really sturdy fit. So you want to make sure that these feet are flattening out. A little tall, but kind of leveling the top of this. I think that looks, sticking here. I think that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go with it. So, kind of decide where we want this handle to be. Sometimes there's sort of a natural spot for the handle. Well, there's a natural spot on this one. Do I see a section that feels like handle-ish to me? I think maybe I just go a little uneven. I think that it needs to be a tiny bit higher. Okay. So I know I said I would never do this method again. And here we are, because I'm just doing one handle and I want to do it quickly and be done with it. I'm just going to pull the handle on the piece. So, scoring a spot where I want the handle. And this is going to have to be kind of a small handle because I don't have very much space to go. So I'll probably connect it down here. Let's do a little loop handle. Now that I'm looking at how small that space is, I'm thinking that I probably need even less clay in my lug. So if you watched my handle building video, I think the method for these is to really have more of a triangular piece so that you're not trying to fully pull an entire handle on the piece. You're really just kind of shaping it. Or at least that's what worked for me better. Okay. Okay. All right. I still think I've got kind of too much clay here, but yeah, I'm pulling it too hard. Does that look okay? Like it needs something more. I think I'm gonna do something like a. I want it to be a little bit more sculptural. You know what my thought is here? Sort of like, oops, vines growing up, I guess. I read so many fantasy novels that I always have like stories coming into my head with like the different things I make. I don't know if anybody does that. Like, oh, these vines are the natural world fusing iron from whatever special potions and spells. I feel like that looks a little bit better. Sort of a more organic-y kind of feel to it. Lots of marks where I've worked on it, but I think it's okay. It's hard when you sell something that you don't actually want to make a lot of, because then you have to deal with people messaging you about it, like, when are there going to be more of that? When is there going to be more of that? And you have to be like, yeah, never. It wasn't that fun to make, or it took too much time. I tip it around for us all. So for this combo, the first thing I'm going to do is dip it in seltzer chun. And seltzer chun can be a little bit of a problem if it's too thick. So, how dry? The thing about like commercial glazes versus glazes you mix themselves yourselves, some of them just dry so fast. That one's already dry to the touch, so I'm just going to do the handle. I have just barely enough of Vickery OS 1 and 2 to do this mug. Oops. I'm seeing how it's going on, and it's a little bit thick. I think I'm going to put a little more water in. All right, let's see if it'll spread a little more normally now. So cauldron mugs have the benefit of being up off the kiln shelf, so that if your glaze does run, it'll often run underneath of the cup, but be just fine because of the feet of the cup. But the trade-off is that it takes a lot longer to make them, so. All right, and since this went on really thickly, this will be the only coat of that I do. VSO2 that I'm putting on with lobster stain. And this is one of those glazes that needs to go on very thick to sort of get that tuxedo look to it, where the iron-rich glaze bubbles up through the stiff top glaze. So your application is going to be more like how you would put oatmeal, Amico's oatmeal on something. You're just kind of blobbing it on and expecting it to be thick, and it may crack a little. As long as it stays on the piece, that is okay. So ideally you're getting this as thick as you can to sort of get the maximum effect. But there's definitely a point in which it just can't really keep the glaze onto the piece. So for this kind of glaze technique, some people will choose to throw the cup a little bit thinner, knowing that they're going to really load it up with the glaze so that there'll be more of a heavy glaze layer that's sort of creating a thicker rim. All right. Hope that's thick enough. If this dries and isn't cracking off, I might try to get a little bit more on there, but I think this is going to be pretty. And here it is out of the kiln. It was fired to cone 6, standard 266 clay. Seltzer Chun definitely looking a little too thin. See, I also signed it twice. All good. And then Vickery OS 1 and OS 2.
And here is that same glaze combo when the Seltzer Chun is a little bit thicker and really shows better.
And this one is Lamont with a little bit of June Perry red along the rim, and also just a teeny bit of Hansen with tangerine stain in it. And this glaze is night underneath and cash blue brushed over top. Cash blue is one of those glazes for me that crazed on B-Mix. It worked okay on the standard 266, but on B-Mix, I stopped using it. And this last cup was dipped in night, and it's textured dark cloud, and I believe I used a little bit of blue with it. I believe I used a little bit of blue opal as well. Thanks for watching. I hope that gives you some ideas for your own cauldron mugs.